Joining us for this conversation is James Taylor, Senior Fellow for Environment and Energy Policy at the Heartland Institute. Mr. Taylor, thanks for being with us.
Thank you for having me on.
All right, so a lot of folks were surprised to hear Secretary Hagel talk about climate change, but of course we've heard this in the past. The Obama administration talking about the risk that climate change poses to our global security. What's really at stake here?
Well, first of all, it's important to keep in mind that Secretary Hagel, he's a political appointee of President Obama. So what this really is just an extension of the Obama administration's priorities, in which they don't see containing ISIS, defeating ISIS, addressing Russian aggression in Ukraine and other foreign policy challenges as being as important as global warming. And that's quite odd, considering we haven't had any global warming in 18 years and counting.
Now, we've seen also how Russia is trying to plan for global warming in recent years when there's been more navigable water near the polar ice caps. Russia has taken that as an opportunity to expand its position. And of course, there are a lot of natural resources coming into play. Countries like Canada and other countries near the Arctic Circle want to claim that as well. Is any of that involved in the U.S. military's focus on global warming, or is it solely political as you're charged?
It's entirely political, and you use the word opportunity, and that's the right word to use. Because as our planet continues its modest warming, its recovery from the Little Ice Age, which posed all sorts of challenges and harms to human health and welfare, what we see is we're seeing longer growing seasons, more crop production. We're seeing resources becoming available that weren't in the past. I guess maybe if somebody wanted to challenge Russia and say, no, you can't access these resources that previously were frozen under snow and ice, maybe that would be a military challenge. But that's not a global warming issue. That's a geopolitical issue.
James, do you think anything is going to happen as a result of this meeting? In other words, a lot of people will say it all boils down to money, that even if many Republicans recognize that global warming exists, we can't afford to do anything to stop it. What are your thoughts on that? Well,
global warming is occurring, and it's a good thing. It's improving crop output. It is reducing extreme weather events, whether we're talking hurricanes, tornadoes, droughts, you name it. The myth that global warming is posing all sorts of harms and damages, that is nothing more than a myth. There's nothing that we need to be doing about it. Just because the temperature is changing, that doesn't mean it's a bad thing. Really, for most of the past 10,000 years, temperatures have been warmer than today, and those were periods when human health and welfare flourished.
So are you saying that you disagree with the majority of the scientific community that global warming does exist and that much of it is done due to man-made issues?
You didn't listen to what I said. I didn't say global warming doesn't exist. I said that we are undergoing a modest warming. I didn't say that it's not man-made. My point is that temperatures are going to rise and fall. They have in the past. What we do know is that temperatures have been warmer than today for most of the past 10,000 years, and warmer temperatures have always benefited human health and welfare. And all the signs of the past 100 years are that as temperatures continue their modest warming, this is benefiting human health and welfare.
So you would say that to the folks in New Jersey?
Absolutely. The folks in New Jersey have benefited from the fact that over the past 50, 60 years, we have had far fewer strong hurricanes or hurricanes in general than we've had in the early part of the 20th century.
And Louisiana? I mean, I can go on and on and on. Look what's happening in California right now.
Sure, and we also know that droughts are becoming less frequent and less severe. I mean, the fact is droughts and hurricanes occurred 100, 200, 300 years ago. It's easy to cherry pick a given event here and there and say global warming must be causing it. But if you're going to say that, then you also have to say that global warming is causing the lack of tornadoes and the lack of droughts. And in fact, we know that on a global and a national basis, hurricanes, wildfires, you name it, are less frequent and less severe as our planet continues warming.
All right, James, I want to go back to something you mentioned, too, about the political nature of all of this here. Senator James Inhofe says that it's not surprising that the president and his administration is focusing on climate change instead of other legitimate threats around the world. Do you think the government is really overstating the threat here to our own security solely for political purposes? There's no national security interest here at all.
Well, I wouldn't say solely for political purposes, although I would say it's an important purpose. This takes the attention away from other pressing issues. And it also helps the Obama administration, as much as they've tried to cut defense spending. If they can't cut defense spending as much as they would like, they can at least force the military to address issues that really take away from our focus on national defense and military preparedness.
And what specific exercises do you think that the military could do to project this motive from the Obama administration to make it look like the U.S. military is seriously trying to combat climate change?
Well, I don't think the military should be addressing this whatsoever.
I know you don't, but what do you think that they might try to do to send that image like, hey, we're dealing with this?
Well, they use the Defense Department and the Pentagon for propaganda purposes, which is what this report is. They're also wasting important defense dollars on things such as developing biofuels for Navy carriers and military jets and conducting more research, as if the federal government isn't researching the issue enough regarding renewable fuels and what have you. When we allocate budget dollars for our military, for our defense, the American people hope and expect that these dollars are going to be well spent defending America and preparing our military from threats such as ISIS, such as Russia and their aggression in Europe, etc., not engaging in more boondoggles to develop renewable fuels.
James, I want to go back to something that you were saying when you were answering John's question about basically that you said that Americans don't see this as a huge threat. But a new Pew Research Center survey actually said 48% of respondents say climate change is a major threat to the United States. That compares to 67% who said the militant group, obviously ISIS in Iraq and Syria, is a major threat. To me, that's a pretty significant number, 48%.
Yeah, 48%, less than half of Americans. What's really important is if we look at a number of polls which have asked Americans to rank, to prioritize pressing issues facing the country, global warming every single time comes dead last. And that's for a good reason. We've heard all of these myths and alarms before, and they rarely, if ever, turn out to be true. And you can only cry wolf so many times before the American people realize that you're pulling our legs.
All right, James, one last question for you, because we know that the U.S. military, through the Army Corps of Engineers, is involved in certain dams, dikes, and that. You don't even think they should be involved in that mission?
Well, I mean, if you want to get into the Army Corps and their specific mission, we could talk about that. But this report that just came out isn't to do with that. This is about military preparedness for global warming. And quite frankly, we should be spending our resources on more pressing issues and concerns.
All right, we'll have to leave it there. James Taylor, thanks so much.